Welcome back to another episode. I think we're on episode 77 this week. I was staying at this hotel recently, and from the outside looking in, everything looked great. The floors were super polished. You could see yourself. The lobby had this nice aroma to it. There was soft music playing in the background. The staff was super friendly, opening doors for you everywhere you went. Everything had this appearance of excellence. And by the time I got to my room, I set some stuff down, just always do a once over in the room, just like anybody else does. And I looked up and I saw the HVAC system. And what I saw was shocking. Full of dust, dirt, and just utter filth. And I remember thinking, that's a problem. Because the part that everybody sees looks so polished, but the system responsible for what everyone breathes is neglected. And that's when a little voice came into my head and it said, this is not just a hotel problem. This is a man's problem. This is where I wanted to kind of take this episode. I bring it into the world that men are living because I get time and time again men telling me how obsessed they are with their polished floors. Now, the polished floors might look like in a man's life, the nice photos, the private jet, the perfect family picture, the nice house, the business wins, the vacation reels, the look how great my life is type image. But none of those things are wrong, right? I want to be clear on something. Success isn't wrong. Money isn't wrong. Looking sharp isn't wrong. But if it's built on the inside that is filthy, then the outside just becomes a costume. It's hollowness. It's not real. Because ultimately, man of class, the exceptional life, I don't want you to stay small. I don't want you to not go and achieve all the things that you want in your life. I want you to build that exceptional life for yourself. But don't build it on rot. Money doesn't fix that system. Money only amplifies that system. See, if you're grounded, money can amplify generosity, freedom, impact, and legacy. I've known guys that have a ton of money and are super generous with their time, helping to give back to the next generation. Go and teach classes, go and sit with students to try to help them figure out where they want to take their life. Guys that are willing to use their business networks in order to go fund a kid's first business, or whether it's somebody that gets out of college and they're just looking for the right connections and how to get started in their life, or maybe they fell off the rails, whatever that it is. I've seen guys extremely wealthy be generous, have that impact, and be very grounded. And then I've also seen the opposite, the emptiness, and money can amplify that too. Can amplify it through addiction, ego, avoidance, isolation, destruction. So I want to almost also bridge from last week's episode where we kind of dived in, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, where we were looking at root cause and this whole idea where you can only get to move forward in life when you actually get to root cause. And we talked a little bit, for those that haven't, let me just go back and do a little recap. You had to take a hard look at your life. You had to go to the places that felt sort of uncomfortable in order to find what's the key thing that's preventing you from moving forward. Once you get to root cause, then you can start to address and get that momentum and be able to move forward in life. Now, I did not realize how quickly that lesson was going to show up in my real life, because I'm walking through this hotel, watching them polish the floors. And then I look up into my room and I see just a system full of dirt. And then all of a sudden I could start to smell the dirtiness, and then the whole thing shifted before my eyes. It's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it was almost like life handed me this visual. Like, this is what happens when we care more about what people see rather than what's actually functioning. And it was just really ironic because last week, we were talking about this, and then fast forward, it's like, God's like, oh, hey, by the way, here, let's make this really concrete. And caring more about what people see than what is actually functioning is not really winning at all. And I know that gets sort of confused, and I think there's a little bit of a dissonance because a lot of times that gets associated with, well, just don't be successful. Or I'll hear a lot of people say, well, that's why I don't want to be, super successful. That's not really it. Those two things need to be mutually exclusive. Being successful and caring about people and having beauty within will then make the life that you're living not just you wearing a costume, but it's actually you living authentically. Okay. And that whole polished floor problem, and it was funny because I've had conversations since then, and we just look at it and be like, hey, don't over polish those floors, because it brings in the don't allow yourself to get too ugly in certain places, because that's when a man focuses more on the external appearances rather than the ignoring internal decay. And so what people see, right, the outward version of that could be career success. It could be the money. It could be a really in shape person, right? If they got, 6-pack abs and whatever else. Could be their social media following. It's just massive. It could be this beautiful house. Could be a beautiful truck. Could be the smiling family photo. It could just be this charisma and this confidence that they have in public. Could be just this sense of busyness. And it could also just be overall status. But what the things that people don't necessarily see, the HVAC system in these guys' life could be the marriage tensions, could also look like health problems, could look like debt, could look like porn addiction, could look like alcohol dependence, could be loneliness, bitterness, exhaustion. Maybe there's a little bit of resentment sprinkled in there, that lack of purpose that starts to become bigger and bigger, avoidance and the conversations that are being avoided. It could be just a spiritual emptiness, that they have all the things material, but on the inside, their connection to something is just lost. And it could also be just emotional shutdown. They're just gassed out and just bitter at everybody. But when those systems starts to get ignored, then it starts to affect the whole building. And the way I tie this back is once I started to see the HVAC system, then all of a sudden I started seeing all the other cracks. The nice scent wasn't there as a nice scent. It was to mask the scent of the dirt and the filth. And then the polishing of floors was to draw your mind to the floors as opposed to some other, underlying things going on. Now, what that means for your personal life is it could mean that your body is starting to break down. It could mean that your marriage is now starting to look more like roommates instead of actually a nice, fulfilling marriage. Could mean that your kids feel that distance. Could be that debt becomes crushing to the point that you feel like you can't get ahead. Could also feel like that addiction that has stopped becoming manageable and starting to get away from you. Could be that the anger comes out in random ways, just a random snap at the kids or just a random snap at somebody in public. Could be that the success starts to feel empty. Could also be that the man realizes that he built a life that people admire, but does not actually want to go live. I've seen this also, where guys build up this life that they're the successful entrepreneur and they're out there, or maybe it's social media where they start having a social media presence, and then it becomes, well, I have to go live this life. I have to continue to keep traveling and showing all these beautiful pictures because that's what got me to where I'm at, instead of saying that's not really who I am and that's not really what I want to live anymore. I'm tired of living that lifestyle. And so this other message kind of came to me that said you can hide dysfunction for a season, but you cannot outrun it forever. And that line also really stuck with me because I've personally been in that situation where I've had some ugliness and I've had some dysfunction, and I've thought it was just for a season, and then little did I know certain things got away from me. And you cannot outrun all those things. You have to take purposeful action in the today and to continue to keep moving forward. Now, one of the easiest things is we always kind of look at health, and this really interesting story. I knew somebody who frankly had more money than most people could ever even imagine or know what to do with. And towards the end of his life, his end of his life was in his 50s because he was just super successful. He made a lot of money. Well, he had access to things that most people will never have. Having a full doctor team, a team of doctors on staff, resources that spanned, countries and different regions of the world, support system, and people just overall trying to help him recover his health. But the heartbreaking lesson that was there is no amount of money nor doctors on staff could help. Because when something has been neglected for so long, even massive resources may not be enough to reverse it. And I remember talking to a buddy. We had a common friend, and I remember talking to him, and it hit us hard, because we like to think, when I have more money, I'll fix it. When I have more time, I'll fix it. When life slows down a little bit, I'm going to deal with it. But some things don't wait for the convenient season. So don't let that train get so far down that track that turning it around starts to become impossible. The earlier you correct course, the less violent that correction has to be, because you can start to make those little bit of micro adjustments every single day, and a little bit every single day turns into cascading effects, right? So you hear this in financial investing all the time. If you just stowed away, 10 pennies a day, and you just kept at it, it feels small until it's not, and you just keep building, and then that compounds over and over and over again until you end up with $1 million. Okay, so don't underestimate. Don't think that you're too far gone. You never are too far gone. I know I said in the example before, like, that was at the end, and everything had stacked up against him, right? Even all of the resources couldn't. But I'd say that's a unique situation for 99% of people out there. There are warning signs. And, for instance, like that guy, he had warning signs. He just kept hitting the snooze button, and he just kept doubling down on all the addictive habits and all the lifestyle changes that were not helping him at all. So don't allow those to go for too long. You can make those changes. 99% of people have things that they can go do today that will help their future self. Okay. A lot of men aren't necessarily ignoring their problems because they don't have the resources or they're not capable of it. They're ignoring them because today still feels manageable. And what that looks like in everyday life is that the marriage may not be great, but it's not over. The blood work isn't great, but it's still functioning. I'm still alive. The debt is growing, but the card still swipes. The drinking is increasing, but I can still get to work. The anger is starting to leak out in random things. We start attacking people, but I keep apologizing, so it's okay. That loneliness that's there, but they can't stay busy enough to not feel it. And so what I've also known and recognized is, I think I talked about it an episode or two ago, that good has a silent partner, and that's good enough. Good enough has destroyed more people's lives than narcotics ever could, because good enough tells us that we don't have to continue to keep going. Just like that marriage may not be great, but it's not over. But if you looked at that and said, but if it really was over, then is now the time that I want to start doing something? Do I have to wait until I get divorce papers to then say, hey, I might need to invest more into my relationship? If the blood work isn't great, but it's still functioning, how long do you want to allow it to just barely function until you have an accident? Then is that the right wake-up call? Maybe that debt is growing, but the card still swipes. So you're going to wait until it actually doesn't swipe anymore? And I know, because I've been in some of these situations. I've had blood work that hasn't been right, that I've had to make health changes. Now, I've been fortunate and blessed that our marriage is really great, but I have been in relationships that hadn't been great, and I didn't pour into them, and they ended. Now, everything had seemed to work out, so that might not be the best example, but I've also been in situations where drinking, casually drinking, and then, a couple times a week, and then it turned into every night, and then realizing, hey, this isn't actually if I'm becoming reliant on it and it's easing my stress level, is that really what I want to go do the rest of my life? Are these the daily habits that I want to take with me? And I can appreciate that it is a slippery slope because I've been there. But I've also recognized that that slippery slope gets more and more steep the further down that you go. Now, some things can be manageable. When I realized what root cause was, go back a couple episodes, right? When I figured out what root cause was in the times in life where I was drinking more, and using it more as an addiction as opposed to just a social, I'm here to do that, but I don't necessarily need it. It could be the anger. I've had definite bouts of anger issues, especially in my 20s, where I was just anger. Now, fortunately, I channeled that anger because I was too embarrassed or too scared to make big waves or like to offend people. So I would take all my anger and I would just take it out on myself. And what that looked like is I would just run nonstop until I couldn't run anymore. It would be to lift until I physically couldn't lift my arms anymore. And I would just destroy my body and take my anger out on myself. And again, then I realized, hey, wait a second. Some people were like, hey, that's great because you've taken your habits, you've taken your addiction, and you put it into things that are building yourself. But I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I was destroying my body so that I could get rid of all the anger instead of addressing the anger up front. I was using exercise as a way of diffusing and exhausting myself so that I didn't have to face into all of the emotional trauma that I was dealing with at the time. Okay. So the snooze button works until it doesn't. And so every time that you hit that snooze button on a real problem, you're not making it disappear. You're just letting it compound. And I can only say this, and I'm urging everybody because I have been there. I'm not trying to say that I've never been there and I've never struggled and life is just great and rosy, because it's not. And everybody is dealing with real things at real times. But I want you to become aware of all these things. I want to share some of these stories so that you get to see and understand that it doesn't have to continue to be this way. And what you think is manageable today may not be in the future. Just like, those examples before, like, do you have to wait really until if your goal line on action, the thing that you're going to go do is when that falls apart, is that far down the road? Is that really the right leading indicator that you want to have in your life? It said differently on your wedding day, if you said, I promise to, love you through, sickness and in health and all those wonderful things. But if you said, hey, I'm not going to take action on our relationship until you serve me divorce papers and then I'll become a better husband, I'm pretty sure you would never have allowed yourself to say those words on your wedding day. Now, it's only through rationalization day in and day out that then we decide it is time to start making a difference and make a different change. And so, I'd go back and reanalyze. What are the promises that you've kept yourself? What are the things that you've told yourself that you might have been snoozing on? And it might be weight. It could be, I've been at times where I've been really skinny, and I've been at times when I've been overweight and muscle, but it also have been in places where I've been overweight and I didn't have the muscle behind it. So I just had extra heavy weight. I was overweight. And I'm not a big guy. I'm not very tall. I always like to think I'm average height until I'm around people who are tall, and then I'm very well reminded that I'm not average height. So, a little bit of extra weight can show up very quickly on me. But it's how much are you going to rationalize? And I know for myself, when I was down at like 150, and I think my heaviest, was like 180, 190. But I would move the tick mark, that water line. I'd say, well, this is okay. And then I get to that weight and then I'd be like, maybe I'll be like this over here. Well, as long as I don't see this, then I'm okay. Well, as long as other people don't see this, then it's okay. And we just quickly rationalize and move that goal line versus what's the standard that I want to have for myself. Am I going to be able to go do the influential things that I want to be able to do with not only my kid, and I hopefully future time, more kids, but then also potentially grandkids? Do I want to be able to be like, is being, the extra weight that I'm carrying, is that going to allow me to live the life that I ultimately want to live? Okay. Yes or no? You get to answer. And, another personal story that I'll share is I've polished a lot of floors when it comes to trying to avoid things. For me, one of the biggest areas was around uncomfortable conversations. I would avoid saying what needed to be said because I did not want anybody to be upset with me. I didn't want to disappoint anybody, and I definitely did not want to be the bad guy. So I'd say yes when I meant no. I would keep the peace on the surface while building resentment underneath, not letting the other person know that I secretly resented them. And I'd convince myself that I was being kind, but really sometimes just straight out being afraid. Enter Amber. Now, Amber has helped me tremendously in this area. Like, I can't even thank her enough for all the area for how much help she's had in this area of my life. Now, if you know Amber, you know she can say no with a level of clarity that is honestly just batshit impressive. No speech, no drama, no guilt, just no. And at first, like, that was just a really hard world for me because I just couldn't even appreciate it. It was just so far removed from me. Like, it was so hard for me to understand because I had attached boundaries to being mean. Like, if you set up boundaries, that was just mean. And I had to decouple that limiting belief that said setting boundaries and being mean are two mutually exclusive things. But she helped me to also see and break that down, that barriers are not actually cruelty. Boundaries can be love, a loving boundary that says, I care about this relationship enough to not let the resentment secretly destroy it. Because I know enough about myself that if I'm going to just continue to keep going along with something, even though I don't want to, I will build up this resentment. And I know that resentment will ultimately just fuel some disagreement that we will never get to seek resolution on. There'll be a bomb that explodes and it'll just destroy this whole thing. So I have to value enough this relationship to set the boundaries that says I can do this, but I can't do it for very long because that's just not who I am and that's just not what I can give. Okay. This kind of ties also back to a couple episodes ago when we were talking about faith, hope, and love. Love is not always saying yes. And I think I remember saying that in the past episode. Sometimes love is just telling the truth early enough that the relationship still has a chance to stay healthy. And that's the thing with this relationship with Amber that I've not been able to go do with my past relationships. Because I would just say yes, even though I meant no. And I would hold this resentment. And sooner or later, things would just go off the rails. That anger would come out. And sometimes it would bubble over within myself. And sometimes it would bubble over into those around me. And it just was never good. And I ended up being the bad guy, even though what you resist persists. So the thing that I was trying to resist, which is to be the bad guy, I ultimately ended up being the bad guy in a lot of people's stories. Now, that's okay. You're not meant to be the hero in everybody's story, nor do you want to, because that means that you've sacrificed yourself all along the way. Okay. So then this gets me into the next piece, which is, what are your vents? Where are the vents in your life? And when I say vents, I mean the HVAC vents. Like, going back to that hotel reference. What are the vents that you have in your life? Not the floors, not the lobby, not the opening doors and showing, manners and great posture. Not the part that everybody compliments. The vents, the hidden systems, the part that affects the air that you breathe every single day, right? What are those? Now, we can break those down, just like in the wheel of life. You can look at health, which is, are you ignoring your body because you can still push through? Is it your marriage and relationships? Are you smiling in the photos for the selfie photo, but then avoiding the conversations that will actually reconnect you? Within the financial lens, are you making good money, but maybe you're quietly bleeding it out via bad habits? Maybe that lack of discipline and that debt that's starting to pile up. Is it around maybe fatherhood? Are you providing materially, but emotionally you're just still very absent? I know for guys, this is a big one where a lot of times we just need to be present. And physical presence is one big thing, but then emotionally present is another. Are you there in both? From a faith and a purpose standpoint, are you so busy and productive and successful, but inside you're just spiritually hollow? Are there things missing? Do you feel like you're going through all the motions, but you're just not feeling filled up? Addiction and numbing, which is a big piece of this, right? That can be an effect. But is there something that you keep calling, quote, under control, even though that's slowly taking more control than you want to admit? It's starting to crack at the seams, and you're realizing that addiction and the numbing might actually outrun you one day. You don't have to fix every single vent today, but you do need to stop. You do need to stop pretending that the smell isn't coming from somewhere, because there's things in all. And I applaud you for that. But then that also means that there's some work in those shadow work that needs to get done, which also says, hey, where is some of the smell coming from? Which vent is it that's a little bit gummed up, that might need a little bit of TLC? And it doesn't have to go from 100% blocked to 100% clean overnight, but just start to take stock of that. Again, we talked in last episode that you can't change that in which you don't track. Well, you can't track that in which you're not aware of. So I'm just asking you to become more aware of all those areas. Name those areas. And sometimes it's easier. You can do the thing where you may not know what to do, but you know what not to go do. So maybe you start, if you don't know where to go focus, like where the vents are, you can start to focus on where have you been polishing? Where am I trying to look better instead of actually becoming better? Is it posting that happy photos while avoiding your wife? There's this interesting thing that I told Amber. I said, ironically, and this isn't true across the whole board. So before people start sending hate mail for, I take pictures of my wife and I love my wife. Like, that's cool. But what I have found happen in previous, families that I've known is they'll have all the pictures of the happy family photos. But then when you go to talk to them, they avoid each other. They're super angry. It's just a night and day difference. And this is one of those exact polishing floors. So it's like sometimes the people that post the most about their family, of they're like, oh, family fun, vacation, everything's great, everything's wonderful, are the ones that are suffering the most. It's not always the case. I've seen definitely, people who post photos and are super happy, and I've seen people who don't post any photos and are not happy. But it takes all kinds. Can also look like buying things to look successful while the finances are chaotic. Things are expensive right now. Gas is up. I think it was like $4.60 I saw somewhere. Like diesel here in Cincinnati was over $6 a gallon. Oh, it's if money is tight, that's okay. Everybody's tight right now. Everybody's feeling the pinch of this. If it's talking about health, while not sleeping and moving and or eating well, there's one thing to talk about all this stuff, but then how are you actually showing up? If we talk about, well, yeah, I need, I exercise and I do all this other stuff. Do you, or do you just preach it? And there's the say-do ratio that I remember one of the mentors that I had in my life had said, you always want to make sure your say-do ratio is 1. Whatever it is that you say you're going to go do, make sure to actually go do it. Because so many people have a say-do ratio of 100 or more. They will say they're going to go do everything under the sun, but then when they actually come down to doing it, almost nothing ever happens. So they have a super high say-do ratio, which says they're just saying everything out in the world that they're going to go do, but they don't ever follow through and follow up and do the things. So he said, always, if there's one thing that you do in life, Eric, make your say-do ratio 1. And it stuck with me to this day, which I'm not always 1. I don't always achieve that, but that's what I strive to do. That's the goal that I try to have in my life, is I try to follow up and do the things that I said I was going to go do, because I know that that's important. And I know that that's what's required of me in order to go become the next version of myself. Okay. So once you kind of understand maybe where you're polishing the floors, right? Where are you doing some of the good things, right? Overinflating, making things look better, sound better than maybe what they really are. What is the system? What is the real system that's creating that issue? It could be maybe a lack of boundaries. It could be on the health side of it. It could be that you're eating everything and, eating everything well and you're doing all the exercise, but maybe your sleep, you're only getting 3 hours of sleep. Sooner or later, that's going to catch up with you. Emotional avoidance. How many times are you maybe avoiding things that needs to be emotionally dealt with because maybe you don't know how, and it's okay that you don't know how, but you got to at least start somewhere. Maybe it's spending in order to soothe stress. I know like shopaholics is a thing. There's so many people. I away afterwards, but or commit, but then having that standard that tries to make things right. It could be lack of discipline, could be unresolved resentment that you're allowing decay you from the inside out. And it could just be that fear of disappointing people. Again, I've been there, I've done that. It doesn't end well. It ultimately, you sacrifice yourself and your own well being in order to go try to protect and not disappoint people. And ultimately, you'll still disappoint people, and then you have to deal with that as well. Um, and so then when you start to see where are the areas that you might you've polished your floors over here, and over here you've got some vents that might start looking like, it might be time to clean. What is the unglamorous fix that you keep avoiding? Maybe it's a doctor's appointment. It could be as simple as just saying, hey, you know what? It's been a while. Maybe I just need to face in. Just just get the doctor's appointment. See what happens. Get the blood work. See what actually is going on. Uh, Maybe it's having that hard conversation and you don't really know where and how to face into it, but you're going to at least start. It could be just reviewing the bank statement. It could be maybe telling somebody the truth. It could be recognizing that habit has turned into an addiction that has turned into eating more of your life. So maybe it's time to do a cold turkey cut that habit, or maybe start to reduce that habit and start to gain control of that addiction, turn it back into a habit in your life. It could be just get help. Raise your hand. Say, hey, I need some help in this area. This is where I need something. Could be setting boundaries. Lord knows it. Like I said, Amber is the queen of that, and she's super good with it. I'm sure everybody knows somebody in their life that is really good at boundary setting. Take some notes. Take them out to coffee. Just learn from them. Could be simple apology. Could be going to bed earlier. Could be walking. You get to kind of see what are the things, the unglamorous fix that you've been avoiding, that you need to just start that conversation. Okay. Then there is this build a maintenance rhythm. This is where the lean part of how you do day in and day out kind of fits in. A clean system doesn't stay clean by accident. It's it requires regular filter changes, right? I'll stick with the analogy of the HVAC system. In in I've been to a lot of manufacturing facilities, and in manufacturing, if you only clean up before a big customer visit, you don't have a good system. You just have a theater, and I've seen that far too many times. It'll be just complete just mess, and then all of a sudden I'll see a night and day, cleanup. And sometimes I don't even have to see it. I have to look at the other people, and when the other people are impressed about the place that they work, and they're like, "Man, this place has never been cleaner." You It's the same type of thing, right? Do you have a theater? Do you have a good system? If you only address your health when the blood work scares you, only on your marriage when she's ready to leave you, only look at money when the debt becomes unbearable. You can see where you're at, theater or actually good system. Because ultimately, an exceptional life is not built by emergency response. It is built by the standard work. That's that's how I have what one of the very many secrets of life that I found that has worked out really well is using this engineering piece, this problem solving, as well as this lean approach, which is how do you start to build in the standard work. And when you do those two things, you can actually really build an exceptional life that is building you up and not draining you. Okay. Now, believe me, if your red flags haven't gone off by now, then, that's rare. In one of those things, something spoke to you. And if it did, that's the area that you might want to go double down on. Okay. Now, let's just get to the resistance section. What are going to be the things that are coming up? What do those voices sound like? Because we've been talking about all the, the rah-rah, these are the things that we want to go do and why we want to go do them. But now if we go visit the resistance, what does that sound like? Well, resistance can sound like, it's not that bad, right? It's the secret, it's a secret partner of good enough. That might be true, but not that bad is not the same as healthy. Okay. I'll deal with it later. I've said all these things, and it's only because I've said all these things that then I can say I've said all these things and I've gone and taken action, and I can say, I feel better and I do better when I actually go take that action. So instead of saying I'll deal with it later, later, honestly, the cool thing, I heard this from somebody, one of these random conversations I had, and they said later is where guys will send their problems to grow teeth. And I was like, man, that hit so hard because fundamentally we've all been there. Maybe it's it's the call that we keep forgetting to call them back. And then before you know it, right, that grows teeth, and then there's a lot of resentment. And so we have all these little problems where it's okay, and then it's not. I mean, we've had that with I've had that with car issues before. I've had that with house issues where I'll be like, it doesn't crack the top 10. I'm simple fix. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom, here it is. This problem now has teeth, razor sharp teeth, and they are just ready to just tear you into a new one because it has elevated itself to number one problem. So later is where guys send problems to grow teeth. Use that one. Another common thing that I hear all the time is like, well, everyone has issues. Well, yeah, but mature men don't use that as an excuse to normalize the decay. If you're fighting for your limitations, then you'll never be able to move forward in your life because you're fighting for your limitations. I've seen this way too often where they're like, well, no, like, but this is normal. Or this isn't so bad. Or like, this is why this has to be this way. This is why whatever that the problem is that they're trying to defend. And you can tell right away, they're defending their limitations. They're trying to normalize decay, and that's not okay. Because again, if you're around people that are normalizing decay, then you are going to become the people that you hang around. So if you're hanging around somebody who is trying to normalize a lot of that, just be aware of that. It's okay to hang out with them. I'm not saying go cut off everybody in your life, but just become aware of that, because if you're around people who are normalizing decay, then you will also normalize decay. But also, consequently, on the other side, if you are around people that are normalizing success, then you will also normalize success. And everybody needs to be successful, and everybody, right? You will be around whoever it is that you're around. Some guys will say, I don't even know where to start. Start where the smell is the strongest. I mean, it's like going through your gym bag. There's going to be some piece of clothing that's just going to reek. Everything may stink, but there's going to be one thing that just absolutely reeks. That's the part where you need to get to, because that area that you keep avoiding is probably the area that's asking and begging for the most leadership right now. Okay. I don't want to upset people. Again, been there, done that. Avoiding the truth to people to keep people comfortable is not necessarily peace. It's just delayed conflict with interest. Again, that whole, I'll do it later, it's just going to grow teeth. So that family drama that you're not willing to lean into is just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse and more complicated, because now whatever it is that you've gone along with, and then you try to change it and say, well, actually, I don't really like that. You'll then get, well, hold on a second. What's changed? Because you were okay with it for however long. So now what's going on? Now you have to disclose and have the conversation that says, well, actually, I really wasn't, but I kept going along with it for the longest time because I didn't really want to disappoint you. Surprise, surprise. Now I'm disappointing you. So it builds, right? All that family drama, friend drama, social drama, work drama, whatever it is, will just continue to build interest as it goes. Okay. So I want to wrap this episode up. We're getting at time now. So just take 10 minutes. Where does my life look better from the outside than where it feels on the inside? Where's my vent? Where have I been hitting snooze button? And honestly, if you were to take that and say, fast forward 365 days, what is the real cost if I let this continue? If I let my blood work be okay, mediocre for another year, what's that going to do? It might be nothing, but it could turn into something. Okay. And then what do I need to tell? Maybe ask for help or maybe set a boundary with. Okay. Take some physical action. You don't have to make it complicated. You don't have to pick all the vents. You can just choose one. Just start to try to clean one system and just take an honest action. Take it and move forward with it. And, this week, I want you to look past those polished floors and look at the vents, look at the hidden systems. Not to shame yourself, not to beat yourself up over it. Don't. We've all been there. I'm still there. There are still things in my life that I'm not quite happy where I'm at, and I'm going to continue to keep getting better. But because you are capable of more than maintaining the outward appearances, you're capable of having a much cleaner and more fulfilled hotel, right? I keep going back to that metaphor. You're capable of building that life that is actually healthy from the inside out, okay? And it's, I guess the last thing, I'm just checking over my notes here real quick, but whatever it is, set the boundary, schedule the appointment, ask for help, because the biggest thing is, when I talk to people about men in class and they're like, oh, so like it's uppity. No. The goal is not to look like a man of class. Like I'm not expecting guys to be out there, with a tuxedo and slick back hair like 007 Bond. The goal is to become one from the inside out. That's my ultimate goal for anybody that's listening, is that I want you to be a man of class. And class is an acronym: continuous learning, adaptable, supportive, and success driven. Okay. I want the guys that are listening to this to become that from the inside out. Because when you take care of the world within, the world on the outside will take care of itself. Okay. Till next time, keep moving forward. I hope you're having a wonderful day and stay safe. And till next time, keep moving forward.